welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this webinar. Today we're talking about storytelling for coffee producers, and I have here with me some very special guests. So first I have Diego from Aquiares estate in Costa Rica. I don't know if you want to say a few words about yourself, Diego.
Yeah, hello everyone. It's great to be here. Thank you everyone who organized. And we are from Costa Rica. We are from Aquiares estate. I've been working at this family business since 2003 and 13, sorry. And yeah, just a long career or a short career in coffee that feels like a long time. I'll be telling more about the story in a few minutes.
Thank you. And we also have Philipp from Kaffeemacher in Switzerland to share a little bit of the roaster's perspective on the subject. Philipp, can you say a few words about yourself?
Yes, I can. Thank you for the humbling invitation, Luisa and Cropster. I'm Philipp, and I'm one of the managing partners of Kaffeemacher in Basel in Switzerland. And we are, we try to be a lot at the same time. So we are a coffee academy and we have a coffee roastery. So we run 2 coffee shops, and with partners, we run a coffee farm in Nicaragua. So and what we try to do as a company is really to try to connect the dots from A to Z, but also be in constant exchange and with everyone in the coffee community and learn more about coffee.
Thank you, Philipp. And we have James from Cropster as well. James?
Hello, everyone. Thanks for the initiative on putting this together. Luisa, I'm James Faria. I'm the sales manager for Cropster in Latin America, and it's going to be nice to discuss storytelling with everyone, and I'm going to come with the tools that help people share stories throughout the steps of their coffee journey.
Thank you, James. And I don't have a slide for myself actually, but again, my name is Luisa. I work at Algrano with content production, so writing the stories of coffee producers or helping them write the stories themselves as well. And I have a background in journalism, and that's why I'm also like mentoring and storytelling for Grounds for Empowerment, working with female coffee producers in Central America. So hopefully we can share with you some interesting insights about this subject. So just to start, I wanted to start by talking about why we chose this topic for this webinar. Because a lot of people, when I talk about storytelling, and this is something that happens in the Grounds for Empowerment program as well, is that people are they're a bit skeptical about storytelling. They don't necessarily think that it's either necessary or something that producers should put a lot of focus on. This is like, yeah, do people actually buy based on stories, or do they don't really buy based on stories? And I was talking to a trader in the last festival I was in. So a few weeks ago, I went to the Manchester Coffee Festival here in the UK, and I was asking people about storytelling. So what do you think? Do you think it matters? Do you think it doesn't matter? And it was very interesting that this trader I was speaking to said, it's like, I don't buy based on stories. I buy based on quality. If the coffee is good, the coffee is good. If I think the story adds value to the person I'm selling to, then yes, that was something I'll consider. But then we can always come up with something later on at the end. And I thought that was very interesting, because if you think historically in our industry, in the last decades, the market was kind of like more dominated by traders, and there's always the presence of traders between roasters and producers. So maybe like because of this, and because they buy a lot of volume, the quality was the main thing, was the most important thing. And now in the last decade or so, because the specialty coffee industry has been growing, there's more direct trade and more contact between the roasters and the producers. Storytelling is becoming more important. So it's not just about quality. We see a lot of people sharing how they're connecting through storytelling and how this dynamic is changing. But it helps us understand that we don't know a lot about it, because things have been changing very recently, and that's why we want to discuss a few of these topics here today. And just to introduce a few things, a few key ideas for me about storytelling and what I see in my day-to-day work. I have here, this is a spreadsheet that I use to illustrate the importance of storytelling when I'm talking to people. So this spreadsheet was created by a cooperative in Brazil, they call Coopervas. I think it was last year, 2020. They were trying to find new buyers because it was the first year that they were exporting. And it's just like, how can we catch the attention of a potential buyer? So they wanted to do something that brought a lot of traceability and added value for a buyer that was interested in making impact. So in this spreadsheet, they not only show the entire pricing model and the price distribution of the cooperative, like saying how much they pay for each producer, for each quality of coffee, each screen size, how much goes for the cooperative, etc. But they also have here what they would call the impact of the premium. And this is something I discussed with them. So it's like, oh, how can we translate the premium to something that people can understand what this means? And in this, if a roaster they could choose, for example, they could choose a 10-cent premium, a 20-cent per pound premium, a 30-cent per pound premium. And this would change the calculation on the spreadsheet. And this could change, for example, how many fertilizer bags does a producer can buy extra if you add this premium. So this was an exercise that they did that made very easy for a roaster to understand the impacts that he was having by paying a higher price on their coffee. And I think what this shows is that, and at the end, they did manage to get a very good client in Europe. They started buying like 150 bags, and then they went to 2 containers in the following year. So I think this is a pretty good case study, a pretty good example of stories. But it shows for me that, yes, one, it has impact on buying decision. 2, storytelling is not just a text, like a written text with paragraphs beginning, middle, and ends, like something like we learn in school maybe. It can be a spreadsheet, it can be an Instagram account. There's a lot of ways in which you can communicate stories. And the third is like the importance of data. So this is kind of like really raw data that can be used. And we have Cropster here as well. And Cropster is really interesting because it can help producers share data very easily as well. So like how that's important, and data also like adds a level of trust and authority to what you're communicating. So here I have, this is actually the email from the buyer when we were talking about the spreadsheet and about the about Coopervas project. They found it incredible. Like they were very happy with the level of transparency, as they put it here, and they continue asking questions. So this is one of maybe 10 emails or something like that. So they were asking a lot of questions, and this is something that's quite interesting as well, because a lot of the roasters that we speak to that that say that their story is important to them is not necessarily that they read something and it's like, yes, this is completely blew me away and I decided to buy. But they usually they send lots of questions to the producers, and the producers that can answer those questions, they have a lot more chances of making a deal. So I just have a few of the topics here that I wanted to present to you guys. That is what we're trying to cover today. It's a lot of content, so we might not be able to cover everything, but we're gonna do our best. And we want this to be a bit of like a more like a flexible conversation as well, and a discussion. So feel free to ask questions in the chat session section on the in the middle of the discussion. I can't see them myself because I'm sharing the screen, but Nick, that is here helping us today, can send them to me, and then we can read them in the middle of the presentation if it's something that's very timely and very relevant, or we can read them at the end during the Q&A. So I want to start by talking about why quality is not enough, and the show with a very good example of like the story is the minimum a coffee producer needs to have today to be in the specialty market. And I have Diego here, and he's a very good example of that. So Diego, if you can start by telling a little bit about your experience and why you think how you developed, like Aquiares developed the story of the estates. If that was always the case, you always had a story as well. So you can tell a little bit just how the evolution of that happened.
Thank you, Luisa. Buenos días, todos los que nos escuchan en español. It's a pleasure to be here. As I look back at the path that we've tried to follow here in Aquiares, it has been one of differentiation. We are a company that is large, a farm that is large, that has been producing a coffee for a very long time, right? Since 1890, so it's 130 years of history. But we had never broken into the scene where we can actually take our name and our story to the hands or to the palates of the consumers. And I think that every farm around the world has a story, and it's just a way to, or the mission is really to find the right narrative and the right message as how to communicate it in order to become more differentiated, right? And that is something that is important if we want to stay relevant, right, across generations. So the story, it begins as simply as with the name, right? So for example, we inherited this name Aquiares, right? And Aquiares is an indigenous name that means land between rivers. So any other farm can have a story just building or starting to build with the name, because it talks about your legacy. It can talk about your grandfather that named the farm, or if it was part of a greater farm, you can start telling that narrative. And it's important because as people also, our name starts to tell a story. On the other hand, this fact that we have, for example, pre-Columbian history, right, in the farm is telling us that there's a legacy, and a legacy usually is something that we can't do anything about, right? It's there, it's in our past, and the only thing we can do is really conserve its purity, right? Its traceability, or its truth, and tell it. So having this legacy, and all farms have a legacy, because all farms are hundreds of years old, and there is a legacy, and this is also part of the story. So yes, Aquiares is old, right? There's these gentlemen that came from the UK back in the late 1800s and founded this farm. And they started building the community. They started bringing people in. They built the church in 1925 that became the spiritual center and the heart of the community. And it started to develop, right, into a place where migrants would come and stabilize and stay in this farm, and it would develop as an economical motor for a new community that was building. And coffee was really important in Costa Rica back in the day. It was one of our main agricultural produce, and it was shipped around the world. And Aquiares is situated right along the railroad that connected to the Caribbean port of Limon. It meant that it was part of that history. So it's also part of the story we tell. And nowadays, right, we compare that past that is one of a large estate where people didn't own their own homes, workers were living in houses that were owned by the farm, that it was somewhat of a colonial model, right? These British guys that owned the farm, and all of a sudden it changed, right? These three gentlemen, Latin American families, they bought the farm, and they started to convert it into something that was more Costa Rican, right? It's a community. So there was a process that initiated with my father, the gentleman on the right, in 1992, where he started a program so that people were able to purchase their own homes and finance it through a program with the government housing loans. And this really initiated a transformation in Aquiares that developed into an independent community that nowadays it looks like this, with nice houses that are well taken care of, these people that share the same origin to the farm that dates back 100 plus years. And these homes and these people are now living in a community surrounded by a private company, but they're part of something that's greater, right? Something that is also an export produce of high quality, a collective effort that begins at the beginning of the year with a pruning. We all look at the flowerings, we hope for the best, we take care of the plants, and we all get together and we harvest the crop at the end of the year. And at the end of the year also, we're exporting across the world, and Aquiareños, these people from the town, are really proud of it. And we can tell that not only the generations from the past, but also the new generations are also growing in a place where they can aspire to educate themselves, to become more, to aspire for higher skilled jobs. And that's something that we really value, that out of our employees, all of them, or 95% of them, own their own home. And this stability, this creation of a community that is stable and stuck between, right, the company can really give us a win-win situation or a symbiotic relationship. So this is part of our story, right? It's something that we cannot separate, because even if someone visits us to Aquiares, they will immediately notice, where does a town end? Where does a farm start? Where's the gate? There's no gate, and all these things really become part of the narrative. And they really connect in an emotional level, I feel, with buyers. So as I mentioned before, my father, he had a great vision for the community, for the farm, for Aquiares, not necessarily that much of a vision for the brand, right? So he was more pragmatic in a sense of selling his coffee. He was an engineer. He wanted to get everything, as efficient as possible. And he didn't know that he was creating something of great value with all these great things that he was doing, which is this story that's really unique, that you cannot easily replicate or copy paste around the world. So that story became really unique, and it's something that we've really tried to highlight, right? He was selling coffee like these bags, right? They had nothing on them. He would make 2 phone calls in the year, to his 2 large traders. He would sell, the harvest, and that's it. And then it was all just scheduling, getting the coffee out, and that coffee would be blended with other coffees, and the traceability would be lost, the story would be lost, the value added of all that, of all those very important and very unique attributes of the coffee and its provenance and its origin were lost in a blend, right? Yes.
Can I ask you something? Was your father telling the story of the farm to these traders that he was selling to at this point, or it was something that he hadn't even kind of like articulated or elaborated?
My father was an amazing storyteller. He was like a natural narrator. He had his past was also involved in a lot of like public charges in the government and things like that. So he was great at orchestrating a great speech or a great narration. So he didn't know that he was doing it, but maybe he didn't feel the need either. Maybe there were different times, and yes, maybe it was an industry reigned by very large traders, and there was very little visibility as to the interest or the actual value that consumers around the world might have towards a story from a farm. So I think that the times have changed, right? And a lot of the efforts that I've tried to do also have to do with a lot of years where we've had bad coffee prices, and that also translates into a greater need for us farmers to differentiate and find a niche market and try to find that stability of income and that sustainability in production. So it's not like he didn't know. He probably knew, and he probably also told the story equally as passionate, and he probably did make sure that the buyers were falling in love with this story as well. But what I tried to do when I came in was do this, like put a brand on it, put some colors into the bags, put some, make sure that the traceability of the coffees was well kept, trying to create these relationships with clients that were visiting us in the farm, that were getting to see how our offerings grew year on year, how our coffees, the quality of our coffees improved year on year. And we've gone a long way. For example, nowadays, we're even putting QR codes on the bags and making sure that everyone that might get that bag, because sometimes we don't know who will, a small roaster here or there in Korea or in Scandinavia, you don't never know, can make sure that they know the story. And this is something that it creates and preserves value. Yeah, there's different ways to tell a story, and there's also different, let's say, ears, or roasters or clients are from different, they're very different, right? We sell to people from around the world, and a lot of them might just need this information, right? They want to know the varietal, they want to know the elevation, they want to know the processing details, they want to know the cupping notes, and that's it, right? They want to make sure that that's on the bag. And they'll say it's from Aquiares, from this farm, maybe they'll mention a name, and that's where it kind of stops, right? But there's other clients, right? And this is where you have to be really adaptive in your storytelling to tell a different story, or to tell a different part of the story, right? Because your story might be ample, right? You're doing a lot of things. You're working 365 days in the farm, and every day can be a story. Something can happen very unique in that day that you can then tell someone, and they'll be blown away by it, right? Other clients might find images like this, and the fact that we've been Rainforest Alliance certified since 2003, and having something very graphic like this comparison between Aquiares and a fully sun exposed industrial, let's say, large scale farm, as something captivating, right? And this is a part of the story that is also is gaining more value, right? What is the sustainability aspect, and what is the impact that your production is having on the environment? So in that sense, Aquiares has also been pushing kind of like the limits of that, and trying to test what sort of parts of the efforts that we're doing are easily let's say, understood or valued by our clients. So for example, using images, these are historic images from 2001. And as we go to the next image from 2010, you can see a very clear difference from an aerial perspective of how the farm changed in 9 years' time. So we went from a fully sun exposed farm to an agroforestry model in less than 9 years. The next photo.
How did you get these, by the way?
This is just Google Earth, and they have a great great thing. You can go back in time and check their historic photos.
No, that's amazing. I'm impressed by how much records you have from the farm, and I think that's really cool when farms have that as well.
Yeah, and you can just find it. Maybe you can go into Google Earth. These are certain things that can really tell a story with little words, right? It's, for example, 2001, how close the coffee was growing to the water, and then 9 years after, 8 years after, on the next photo, you'll see how much that barrier or that buffer zone from the river grew, right? So in this time, we adapted and we changed our perspective and our vision of how to farm. And there was a new story. Let's say there's a new story that starts building up in the early 2000s, which is how Aquiares transformed from being a farm that is industrial, focused on productivity, focused on let's say short-term gains, into a more sustainable model. And that was the basis, right? Having these shade trees, having these practices was also the baseline for doing things that are maybe more innovative, like going out and doing a greenhouse gas emissions inventory, like the one you're seeing here, right? So we did our first greenhouse gas emissions inventory in 2016, and we've done it every year since then. And we've also measured how much of the farm from the shade trees and from the protected forest is actually absorbing of CO2, right? So we became, and we got certified carbon neutral in 2016, and we've kept that, right? So you can, and no one really, you know, this is not Rainforest Alliance, this is not UTS, this is not fair trade. It's kind of like a certification that we started, right? So you can build your own story. You can find what attributes of your farm you're really strong at, and you can innovate, right? You can be the first at telling a part of the story that no one's heard before, right? And this is something that I feel that opens a lot of doors, even especially when you are surprising the industry, when you're surprising your clients, something that they maybe haven't even done, you know, and you do it, you know, and this really gives some more weight, let's say, into your story. Of course, you can talk and frame your story really nicely. And it has happened to me many times. Maybe I'm in a trade show, you know, I'm pitching, I'm inspired, I'm telling all these great attributes of my coffee. Maybe he's even sipping on my coffee. And then there's questions that, you know, will be like, oh, so you're not fair trade? Wait, no way. You know, like next, you know, oh, you're only at 1,200 meters? You haven't won a Cup of Excellence? You know, like, I understand these things, right? If I'm from the perspective of the client, maybe they're really after farms that have won COE or are fair trade, you know. So you have to be careful, because you cannot get demoralized by these kind of things, right? You gotta be. It's like a dating game, right? You cannot be demoralized if they say no, right? You have to keep pitching. You have to keep going. You have to listen and analyze the body language of the person, how much they're interested in one topic or the other. At the end of the day, your story is so broad. It's so interesting, because the work we do as producers, honestly, it's the hardest job on the coffee industry. And that day-to-day, you know, understanding nature, predicting the weather, working with all these changes that we see in the farm, they're all stories, right? And I feel that it's really important to empower yourself as a producer, and to understand that not everyone out in the world will have the same time or the same just attentiveness to listen to you. And that's okay, you know. Rejection is okay. You'll find someone that suits more your story, and then you'll begin a story with them, right? You'll begin a story with your client.
No, I find very interesting here that you says like, oh, your farm is only at 1,200 meters above sea level, because this is something I've heard people ask as well. And it's kind of like, oh, it's not high altitude enough, so I'm not going to buy your coffee. That's kind of like a myth that was built in the industry, and that by you showcasing how good a coffee can be from a lower altitude farm as well, you can like deconstruct those myths and help the industry go beyond that kind of thing that they used to believe in the past.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we just have, I think
Diego, I want a question. How many people live in Aquiares?
About 2,000
2,000
people. Yeah, and only about between 150 and 170 work for the farm. So the town has developed a lot, and a lot of people have gone, you know, get different jobs outside the farm, but they still want to live in the town. It's a nice place to live. So yeah,
it looks nice. I think I want to move and work.
Hey man, come visit us. Come visit us. We'll start with that.
It looks beautiful. Congratulations on all that work and advances you've done. That's beautiful.
We'll be waiting for you, man.
I hope to come soon. Well, Diego already showed a lot about what I've come to talk about. Is just a small part in the story, is in just of collecting data, and how that can be important on your story and understanding your coffee as well as a producer, and especially a producer of specialty quality. So when people come and ask you information about your farm, it's always nice to be able to present information organized and detailed about processing, cupping, making sure the traceability is there, which we've seen as Aquiares has implemented to the fullest. You can see And so that's where Cropster comes in as a digital tool, but you don't need it. Doesn't have to be Cropster, someone can start, you got to start somewhere. An Excel sheet, a notebook is what many people are using, but nowadays you're able to take notes on your phone, or of course, always bring it back and to put it into a database. And Cropster just brings those tools to allow you to share information with people who are interested in buying your coffee. And then I also find very important too is that roasters who you sell your coffee to, and getting the information, their cupping notes, what they perceive, what they got out of the cupping. And also I see lots happens of roasters sharing roast curves with the producers as well. I don't know, Diego, do you receive, do roasters often send you, give you the feedback of their cupping notes and their roasting profiles that they do of your coffee?
Yes, I wouldn't say often. I would definitely want to get more, but I feel that this happens maybe through time. So maybe not the first year, but maybe the second or third year where you're selling to the same person. Then the relationship kind of builds, and it also helps to talk about maybe why the coffee was a little bit different one year to the other, and kind of finding what are the different practices that we've done in the farm that maybe changed the profile of the coffee. So I think over time, yes, and that is really important.
Also the profile of the cupper, because if you probably give your same coffee and you do a cupping session with someone from Korea, maybe someone from the UK, the differences, certain aspects of the coffee can be different based on regionality. And what about in terms of, I know you send your coffee everywhere, and I saw Luisa was taking it, having it today. What about getting, how often do you get to taste your coffee from other roasters? How often do you get that?
This is I wish I had more, but Costa Rica has this weird thing where it's a pain to get the roasted bags into the country. So there's an address in the US that we use, and from time to time we'll just bring a bag full of all the coffee bags.
Very nice.
Yeah. But definitely that's definitely important. And usually I need to say it usually tastes much better when roasted than we do. I have to admit.
No, can I just say one thing as well? Reading, seeing this cupping report from Cropster, is that whenever you see on both sides, like you see a roaster sharing this with a producer, or a producer sharing this with a roaster, you kind of see like this people are more on top of their game. Like it looks very professional when you get this level of information from a supplier or from a client, someone that you're working with. And I think like if you're talking about kind of like you can read between the line of like with communications, I guess you get it's kind of like it feels like you can trust people more. I don't know what you think about it, James.
Well, I feel, of course, keeping the lines of communication and getting feedback from both ways, especially when, as we know now in specialty coffee, the direct trade with producers to roasters, the roasters some are more involved in, helping with production of coffee. Sometimes there's farmers who have a jewel of a coffee and they didn't know, and middlemen are coming and telling them, oh, it's this quality. But then when the trader goes to sell that coffee, it's like 10 points higher once it gets into their hands. So I think it's important also for the families of the farmers to then train to get involved in cupping their coffees and knowing that they have good coffee in order to be successful. If that's the road they want to go into specialty. If you want to just go into commodity, then it's a different story. But it's important to know what you have. And then I would be interested to know well, Philipp says he works with the farms in Nicaragua, so I'm sure he's sharing information and working with the farmers closely as well.
I love how you did the transition between panelists, James. It's very subtle. It's very good. So he's introducing you, Philipp, for one of the parts of the this presentation that I'm very excited about as well. You're talking about the target audience and the structure of stories.
Yes. Excuse me, my voice. I mean, this is the cost of European winter. So my voice is a bit low today. I just hope you can understand me.
Your microphone is
top notch, right? So
top notch.
that measures it up. Right. So, well, I very much agree with everything you said before, and also Diego, what you said about your father was fantastic. That he was actually a gifted storyteller, and maybe I used that one to open the things I want to give you now. I would say we are all born as storytellers. We just forget it sometimes. You know, I have little twins, and they barely speak. So, well, they do speak, but I don't understand them. So I would say they have their own language, right? And I hope one day they learn my language too. But still, even without understanding them, I feel touched by what they tell me. So they create an emotion and I feel the connection and I feel touched, whatever they tell me. Now, specialty coffee roasters, they do not specifically buy coffee only. So they buy stories too, what we heard from Diego too. They buy trust, but they mainly buy emotions. And these emotions come with the coffee. Now, roasters need something that is actually in short demand, right? So they need green coffee, like good green coffee. And the coffee comes with all the background. So in that regard, I see the position of coffee producers here fairly elevated. So good coffee is still rare. And there are more and more roasters coming on the market, and they all need a specific coffee. They all need a specific story. And because there are more roasters, the roasters themselves have to be more specific. So I see new roasteries now opening up, and some focus on purchasing coffee from women cooperatives only, others from indigenous people only, others from rainforest coffee only, others from cooperatives that have a very strict approach to environmental challenges, etc. So coffee roasters are getting more specific. So I think the stories of coffee producers should become more specific too. So, and as Diego said, pretty much everything, literally everything is a story. Now, so you can actually choose certain topics that you think should represent the work you do. And as Luisa said, the best quality is not really something that's connecting, because best quality is something specialty coffee roasters expect as a given. So it must be best quality. And of course, it should be from 1,200 meters above sea level or higher, as we heard from Diego. So best quality is a given, but this is not something really that connects or creates strong emotions. The things you do every day, that can connect and that can create emotions. And we are human beings, right? And we are by definition a very complex creature. And we do many things at the same time. And we are different people at the same time. I mean, we are sons, we are daughters, we are parents, we are partners, friends, etc. And choose a specific hat when you talk about something you really care. And as Kaffeemacher here in Switzerland, we try to deal and comment on many different topics. And these vary a lot, but we always try to be consistent in the tonality we use. And the tonality we use to explain something and to communicate is always based on transparency, exchange, and community. Yes, of course, we do coffee and we talk about coffee, but basically the tonality is always the same. And that allows us to speak and to touch upon topics that vary a lot, but with the same tonality, it creates a really good picture of who we are. So we can choose of how we...
Can you give an example, please?
Yeah, we feel that we should talk about many things. So, from agroforestry to logistics to transparent pricing to preparing a proper cup of espresso. And so we try to cover all these topics, but we're still the same people. So we wear different hats, but we try to use the same language that focuses on, hey, we are open to share, ask your questions, and we tell you everything we know. And with that, sharing everything we know, I can say we're pretty successful with it, because others ask us, why do you share everything you know about coffee? So, well, because people come back and they want to know more. Even if we do not more about it, they think we do. And because we have some background, we can connect the dots and give a specific answer. So, meaning you can choose how you want to be represented, right? And so you choose the tonality, you choose the pictures. So Diego showed pictures, right? And the pictures Diego showed from Aquiares, I mean, they vary a lot. So you can stress the kids, which is a really emotional topic always, right? You can stress the church. All right. With the church, you can target, let's say, like a religious group, let's say, because they may buy your coffee. You can show trains because you have some, I don't know, train people because they like trains. I mean, forest people, etc. I mean, there's so many things you can share. You can use everything as a story. The pictures is a story. Graphs are a story. And look at the books. I mean, this is a story too that I just tell you now, right? I mean, these books look amazing. Do you really think I read them all? No, I just know they are colorful and nice, and it may creates the impression that you think, well, what a smart guy. I mean, everything is a story, and you could use literally everything. How do you find a story? Well, it just happens, right? And most importantly, we just need to be very sensitive. One simple exercise I sometimes do, I would love to do it every day. It's 5 minutes a day. You can compile an Excel list, and one line is one day. And you just write down what you experienced this day, what was a bit different from a normal day. Let's say, today a pencil broke. All right. I mean, it's just a simple event, but maybe you can create a story around it because everything is a story. Now, what you see on the other side, well, the story scaffold, we talked about, well, now we do have some elements, and we do have all the ingredients for a story. Let's say my pencil broke yesterday. Yes, we are born storytellers, and we learned along the way that what stories connect with others, right? We also learned what people like to hear, but we also learned what bores people and makes them walk away from you. So knowing this helps us to create a storyline. And you have the ingredients, but if you look at this so-called story scaffold from Bernadette Shiva, she wrote some excellent books about storytelling, and I can only recommend her books because she makes it really easy, and she really breaks it down to some simple elements, how to create a story that with very simple ingredients. Now, she talks about the 5 C's, and I really like the concept. And the 5 C's are context, catalyst, complication, change, and consequence. Whenever I do a text, or whenever I do a presentation, so we have a YouTube channel, and in some videos, I just speak 50 minutes like this into the camera. I mean, it's really hard to speak 50 minutes, you know this. So, of course, I have a concept in mind, and the concept is pretty much based on these 5 C's. So let me give you an example. Context is, as it said, the backstory, right? So where are we? So you can create a story around everything. So let's make up an example now, right? About coffee. So the context could be a producer in Costa Rica, not Diego, but let's say a producer in Tarazu, because it's really steep and it's really high, and it's much more than 1,200 meters above sea level. So there's this random producer and farms coffee in a very remote place, very high up in the mountains, right? The terrain is very steep. It's really cumbersome to bring all the cherries to the mill. It's really tough work. So you set the context, you have a hero, and the hero can be any person. But once you have a person, it's easier for everyone to relate to. So then comes the catalyst. So something happens, an event. Let's say the producer breaks both of his legs, both, just once, like wakes up, both legs are broken. Jesus, what I'm going to do, right? Who should bring down all the cherries down to the mill? Because they need to be picked, and it's so cumbersome. No one can do it. I don't even have a donkey. I don't have a car. I cannot even drive a car. What shall I do? And then comes the complication, because, coffee is my only source of income. So what will happen now? Can I feed my family? Do I survive next year? But then comes the change. And this is one of the most important things, right? So the farmer remembers an old friend who said, this guy, he works as a plumber and he uses tubes for his plumber work. So he calls him and proposes to use tubes to transport the cherries from the mountains down to the wet mill. So the friend comes next day, they install the tubes, and the pickers just empty their buckets in the tube, and the cherries just walk down to the mill. And the consequence then, there's no more need for cumbersome transportation, so he can actually cure his 2 broken legs, and there's less stress, less tiring work, and there's a faster and safer way of working. Now, this is not a real story, right? I just made one up, but you just can press pretty much every story into a concept. But there's a difference now to an anecdote, because an anecdote is just the fun story that might have happened. It can be funny, it can be surprising, it can be very sad. A story, however, always has the approach to change something. So when you tell a good story, it's engaging. When you tell a good story, it animates someone else to think differently about a certain topic. And a good story eventually leads to change how we are thinking and finally acting.
Awesome. I think that's quite a lot of things to take in, but I guess it shows a little bit, like it's a good example of what Diego was saying about his own family story in terms of like the challenges of the community, and how with the help of Aquiares, you have like building houses and changing a little bit from like the colonial scheme from like a local community owned enterprise. So I think that's that can be applied to any kind of stories, and this is like a research that I wanted to talk about. When I was preparing for this webinar, I was doing some research in terms of storytelling, not just for coffee, but for agricultural products in general. And it was very difficult to find information about it because there's not a lot of research in this thing, and there's not like research that is available. So I didn't have even a lot to compare to this that I found. So this is like this research from the Taiwan University, but I was reading it and I found it very interesting because it relates to some things that we were discussing before regarding not just emotions, but regarding brand. So what this research is doing is that they're studying basically how effective is storytelling for marketing purposes for agricultural products. And what they say is that because agricultural products, they're a type of product that usually lacks branding. So like there's not a lot of research into marketing for this. There's not a lot of not like a strong marketing in general for this kind of product, unlike luxury products or unlike more like lifestyle related products as well. We don't know a lot about it, so we don't know how effective it is. So when I spoke to people about storytelling for coffee producers, one of the things that they did tell me is this, like, I think it's effective, but I don't know how effective it is or how much it is. And one thing that they show here is like, so they talk about how quality used to be like perceived as the basic and the main need that consumers had. So if your product was a good product, you would be able to sell it. And in the last, I think since the 60s, they started changing around the 60s. It's not only, this is not the case anymore. So it's like a good product, like Philipp said, is kind of like, is expected. It's like that's it has to be there, that's a given. But then the whole dynamic changed from like a product based dynamic to a more consumer focused dynamic. And when you're talking about consumer focus, you're talking about what the consumer gain from it. So like is how they perceive value, what's the experience that they have. And that's why the whole approach to marketing a product went from the simple description of that product or the attributes of that product to a more experience focused marketing of it. And this is happening to agricultural products in a slower pace, so to a lesser degree still. But I think when you see farms like, I don't know, La Palma y Altucan, for example, that have become really strong brand names, I think you can see the potential that this has and how how this is starting to change. So what I write here, like I selected this isomorphism, which is a word that like I find it hard to say even, versus differentiation, is because traditionally agricultural products are commodities, and one of the biggest difficulties that you have to market a commodity is that because it's all the same. Like all the oranges from 50 different orange producers are the same. They don't have a lot of things different to you in the product itself. So the story can be used as a factor to add differentiation to this product. So like in the emotional aspects that you bring to the product are the things that differentiate this product more than the product itself, if that makes sense. So in coffee, like the quality of the coffee and how that coffee is processed, that is a factor of differentiation. But also because you have more and more producers, and which is a good thing, obviously, investing in quality. So you have a lot more producers doing anaerobic coffee. You have a lot more producers doing naturals or different fermentation processes. So if like 5 years ago, doing a different processing method was enough to differentiate a producer from others, now it's not anymore. And yes, it's tough that the bar keeps getting higher and higher. But I think if you have like a good story to differentiate yourself, you can maybe not have to change as fast as like trying to pursue all the trends and all the different things in processing methods, which are more difficult as well. Because if you think about processing and innovation in actual coffee farming, that takes time because it takes years for you to get to experiment with coffee. It takes years for you to figure out what works. If you're growing a new variety, it takes years to see if that variety yields the results that you're expecting. One very interesting thing that this study shows is that according to the results that they had, they say that brand attitude doesn't affect the intention of purchase for agricultural products. So if, for example, you're building a logo, having a massive like nice brand, trying to like work out the name of the farm necessarily is not what's going to drive more intention of purchase. What they say does do that, however, in terms of the storytelling and the marketing, is generating emotion. So if you can get consumers to relate to your products and get not to your product, sorry, to your farm and to your story, and feel like put themselves in your place or put themselves in your shoes, then you can get them to like remember you more, have a better impression about your product because they know you and that they identify you, and that can have an impact in intention of purchase. But I wanted to ask Philip, James, and Diego what they think about this, because this research was aimed at final consumers, not necessarily at roasters or buyers. Like in coffee, it's a B2B, it's B2B commerce. So it's slightly different. The dynamic is different if you're talking to a final consumer. So I don't know if you guys have any thoughts about this, if you agree with it, or if you think that the brand is indeed important.
Well, I feel that nowadays in our industry, there's so much connection between the clients of my clients and us, right? Through social media, through how easy it is to communicate through social media, that sometimes we feel that we're also kind of like in the same team, sort of say, like, you know, the final consumer is the end, you know, it's a client, and then my client, the roaster, we're kind of in the same team, and we're both telling the story. So I feel that, you know, having a logo, having a good presence, and being there like on par with maybe the branding of the roaster as well is something that it might give more of a surprise to the consumer, right? And something that is that, as you were saying before, can also give this impression of of a stronger relationship between the roaster and the producer, which is more credible, and you can trust it more, and also trust that the coffee will be good. So I don't agree with this.
I was going to come in. We have some questions before Philip. This is one that's related to this from Lucia Ortiz from El Salvador, Las Mercedes. She says, as a producer, how do you feel about roasters sharing your story? How do you want your story to be treated / told? So that would be for you, Diego. As a producer, how do you feel about roasters telling your story?
Yeah, of course. It's something that you feel honored in a way, right? Because you're being told from someone else's perspective. Your story is being told by someone else's perspective, and it's really interesting. It changes though a lot, and maybe some clients might not tell the story right. Maybe there's little glitches here and there. Maybe there's sometimes you might even look at a post or packaging or something that was written about your farm and say, man, this is off, and I think if that happens, the best thing to do is to contact that person and maybe have a face-to-face meeting, tell them about the story, and just kind of like correct it in a way. But it's something that is honoring, and it's also something that it gets you in more of the same level of you actually collaborating with your clients.
We have another question from Marcio Paz. He says, how long do you consider a story might be on your web or on your coffee bag? I don't know if anyone who wants to tackle this, Philip.
Oh, there's so different kinds of stories, right? So maybe can I answer this question about an input I would like to give, and maybe continue with what just Diego said?
Yes.
I mean, yes, it's a noble task, right, to tell a story, but also for roasteries, it's a pretty responsible and noble task, because let's not forget, I mean, the vast majority of coffee roasters have never been on a coffee farm, and some never will or never can for whatever reasons. But they need something from producers, so they need green coffee, and they have to offer something that their consumers want. And the consumers want to have more information, so the roasters need more information from coffee producers. So it comes back to coffee producers, and then the input or the raw data they can deliver to coffee roasters. So is the data all beautiful? Roasters will probably create a very cheesy, romantic, kind of a 90 minutes love story, kind of Titanic movie storytelling, which might be not entirely true, right? But it feels good. But yes, that can create quite some tension then to the coffee producer. So, but if the raw data coffee producer can give to a roaster, and this data is all set, probably a roaster will stress the points of, poverty, and the role of a roaster as bringing cure to whatever situations a producer is in, and so on. So it really depends on the data that is given to roasters. So the data can be really raw. They can be really raw and direct. And yes, the digital options we have, let's say Instagram, they can help a lot. So I see some pictures here, and I come straight to them. I would like to mention two Instagram channels I really think are worth following to see how they do storytelling and why they affect me. So one is Mark from Finca Rosenheim in Peru. I mean, you may hear it. I mean, it's a German name, right? And the story of the farm, there's a German legacy behind it too. And Mark uses the stories of Instagram to tell what's happening on a farm. So his stories are really raw, they're uncut, and they're fun. And it creates a lot of momentum. It creates a lot of emotions and connections, because he shares sometimes he's desperate because there's no water. So, okay, there's no water, I cannot wash the cherries. And you just follow him and what he is doing, right? So he really takes you on a trip to the farm, and you just follow him. There are no only ripest cherries pictures. So I hope that for many roasters, this time has gone only communicating only the ripest cherries, right? I mean, these are pictures from our farm, and these are my favorite two pictures because they are just real. It happens on every farm, but are they attractive? No. I mean, do you want to see them when you portray a product? Not really, but they, you know, they're just real, and it should be part of the whole storytelling. So look, this is really what happens, and you should understand as a coffee roaster or as an end consumer, this is part of the whole thing, because there is not only ripest cherries. Then other things, right? I mean, technology is a key thing, right? I mean, many producers use, I mean, technology. I mean, of course, I would say the vast majority has a smartphone or a telephone. And here, that was in our farm, so we did some GPS. Well, we located the farm and we made new microlots. Is this important? Well, maybe. I think it's part of the storytelling too, to show some roasters and some consumers, look, it's coffee production is full of technology, or it can be full of technology too. It's not all romantic small scale farming and everyone is happy, because I see this version of coffee production way too often still. Sorting is another thing that is a key thing that, to achieve good coffee, but I see this, I don't see this a lot, because also there's no ripe cherry involved, and it's very technical, but yes, it's a key element. So the more data people can learn, and the people like the roasters and consumers can learn, then you are definitely a source of wealth of knowledge. And then people want to connect and want to know more. So it's not a sales push. It's just taking people in and sucking them into your world, and let them know more about the things you do, the everyday work, which is for many very exciting. Also, progress is something we always like to show. This is when we arrived at the farm and the wet mill before we bought it. It was really bad conditions. So we started to post pictures of progress, and that created so much reactions, and people wanted to know more. So, oh, how is the wet mill going? And when is the new phase of construction? Simple things, but worth telling. And also celebrating small steps. So this was when we signed the contract. You know, it's a really bad picture, and you know, we're very tired, but it was also fun to show it. Yes, because it's a small but very important step that was for everyone involved.
You know, I remember seeing a crowdfunding campaign from Raw Material. I don't know if you were a part of that, Philip. They were building a mill in Colombia to support I think the Algrano community. So it was like a small community in Colombia, and they got like roasters to buy coffee when they were still planting the trees around that mill. For that community of producers, and people followed how the mill was being built and how the trees were growing in a period of 3-4 years until they received the coffee, and everyone was so invested in that coffee. By the time it came out, there was like this massive event. It was like something really magical for people, because they followed it like every 3 or months or so that they would update it, but for 4 years.
That's fantastic. I mean, if you can create tension for so much time, then bring the relief, right? The coffee now. I mean, that normally works. And that was fantastic. I followed that project too. And I was amazed that, I mean, creating attention so long, it takes a lot of takes a lot of effort, right? So another channel or Instagram account I would like to stress is El Cafeólogo from Chiapas, Mexico. I mean, this is a different style. So Jesus Salazar, he uses really stylish photographs. He has a really clear message, and this message is all about the work producers do. So he sources coffee, he consults producers, he works with them directly, then he buys the cherries, they decide together how they want to process it, and he sells it. Now he's kind of a mediator, and his Insta channel is full of admiration for the people he works with. And both of them, Cafeólogo and Finca Rosenheim, what they do, they're very consistent. So they show up pretty much every day. And it's them. So it's raw, it's direct. You can follow them as a human being. And it's easy to connect with them because you see their faces, you hear their voices, you see their emotions. And this is so easy to connect with someone. And no agency, no super duper marketing agency can do this work, because it's very polished. But in the other two cases, it's them, it's real, and it's easier to connect with them.
Yeah. So coming back to the to that study. That was something that I wanted to discuss. And I, by the way, I'm aware that we're short on time. That we're a bit beyond 5 p.m. So I don't know if I would ask everyone to like just stay with us a little bit, and then we can do some questions when we finish here. So I'll just go through this bit very quickly. This is something that I wanted to engage Philip and Diego on to get their perspectives. When I was reading that study about agricultural products and marketing, they mentioned how they tell the story of this this producer, what's his name? Okay, yes, Mr. Chung, a dragon fruit farmer, and how by telling the story of all the difficulties that he had, of like a period of crisis and nearly going to poverty and really struggling to sell his product. He gets people to identify with him, creates emotion, and people want to help him. So like they end up buying their product because they want to help him. So I think in a way, there's a fine line here between creating this empathy and making people feel sorry about you. And I think as a producer, that's not what you want. So there was, when I was last time in Guatemala, I was discussing pity marketing with these two guys here. So this is Mario on the left and Chris on the right. And they are two farmers and exporters in Guatemala. And they were talking about like, oh, how when they first started traveling to destination countries, so they first started going to the US to visit roasters, they used to see like, people, photos of people on the wall, they were all sad, they are poor, they have like soil on their fingernails because they were picking out all day long, everything was dirty, everything was a bit sad and a bit depressing. So they said it's like, we remember seeing this and we did not identify with this at all. And this is not the what we want to communicate about what farming is and what about coffee production is. So I think there is a shift now in terms of how producers, they want to showcase themselves. Like there's not farming, coffee farming is becoming more business-like and more business-minded, as you can see with Diego's story. So you want to generate emotion, but not necessarily by making people feel sorry for you. I don't know how you feel about that, Diego and Philip.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a this is a tricky topic because, you know, maybe the reality from a visit to a farm might be that they are struggling, right? So a roaster might feel that they just need to portray reality in a way, and that maybe they bought the coffee or the coffee they bought is probably the one that got the farmer the most value out of the other sales he made or something like that. But I feel that there's a sense of also like we are proud as producers of what we do, and we are not so proud, right, at some of the realities of the industry, like the fact that it's a commodity and the fact that we can control sometimes a lot of things like price. So I think roasters or buyers need to be very careful, because there is a fine line there between depicting reality and depicting a reality that producers don't want to be related with, right? They're sometimes a victim of something they can control, like price, and in a way this needs to be very clearly explained to them. You know, ask permission. Can I take a photo? Is it okay? You know, I'm going to publish this. Do you like it? Because at the end of the day, it's the farmer's business. Maybe it's his house, maybe it's his family that are portraying those photos or in those images. And at the end of the day, well, they're going to be spread to areas or people. They're going to see them that he can't control either. So I think there has to be a level there of communication, so that it's okay, let's say.
Yeah, no, this I'm just showing here before Philip gives us his impression. This is an example I really like. This is a book that was written by Vava Nguaini in Kenya. And what she's trying to do through photography and storytelling as well, is to depict producers how they want to be portrayed. So instead of like showing these female producers or female pickers in their dirty clothes, like after a very long day of work, like feeling really tired, and like, and take photos of them in that scenario. It's like, how do they want to be? How do they want to be seen? How do they want the world to see them? It's like, so yes, I want them to see myself in like my really like colorful clothes, representing my culture, something that's a bit more, that tells more about what I am as a person than what I am as the background of a coffee farm.
Yeah, this came to also from a panelist who kind of tackled this. Jamie Leon asked, how would you integrate more stories of people who collaborate at farms, such as coffee pickers, who usually struggle to get a decent wage in general life? They are kind of nomads traveling from farm to farm to make a living. I think they should be more involved, and farm owners, roasters, buyers in general kind of support them more. Education, stability, kind of get them to be part of the whole story as well. So this is Jamie Leon's opinion that he commented here in the chat about. So we're showing a little bit different aspects of this, as in this case, these Kenyan women wanted to be shown in their Sunday best instead of in their Monday worst.
Let's not forget the power of writing, right? I mean, texts and reading is actually something really important, not only pictures, right? So pictures can be an entry and helps. It's an invitation to read something, but the specific topics that you just mentioned, or that Jamie, I guess, just mentioned about coffee pickers and everyone involved, that actually we can drink coffee here. That is such a important issue, and I guess it's maybe more justified to really write on that. Yes, we can take pictures and we can display them, but texts and reading is actually really important here. So, but I see that this is a chance actually for many coffee roasters, because coffee roasters, I mean, I previously aside, everyone is a native storyteller, right? But that doesn't mean we are good storytellers. So coffee roasters as well, they need to work on this, and they just can ask coffee producers too, can I use this picture? And why? Sometimes, or like when we have a new product we want to showcase, then I ask for pictures or ask for photos. I ask the producers and say, well, what pictures can you send me, and why should I use them, and what's the background of the story? So I have all really a made selection by the producer that the producer wants to give me, so I can use them. So it's okay, kind of the clarification. So, and I can use them. Yes, and it's actually simple, because what Diego said is actually true. Just ask, why should I use it? How can I use it? And yeah, ask producers, and maybe you can tell the story with them together.
And can I say one thing as well? We've been doing a few like marketing sessions with some of the producers on Algrano, that they, as like part of a competition that we did last year. And one thing that we started asking them is like, why don't you ask the roasters that you work with to share photos of them with you? Because if you want to tell a story of, I'm a successful coffee farmer, I have relationships with roasters all over the world, my product is being showcased in this country, and if you're so proud of it as well, why not do the invert, right? Like the reverse, and get photos like from your clients in your social media? Like they do it with you, so why wouldn't you do the same, right? I think that can help with your storytelling in social media and websites, as a coffee producer, that can create more credibility and more trust. So if like for a new buyer is interested in you, there's like, oh, they see that you already export or that you already sold to someone, even if it's a local roaster, it can give you some more credibility as well. So I think that they can see like the final result of the product as well. I think that's really that could be really useful for producers, and it's a very underused tool.
Yeah, you get a picture of the roasters and each of their cars, so you see how in front of their what car they drive. So actually, go ahead,
sorry.
Diego.
No, I just wanted to mention briefly that I really liked how Philipp presented these photos of progress. And I feel that that's really important, because no matter how I don't want to use a bad word, but how low that baseline is where you're starting, if you're building up and you're progressing, then that's going to be well received by the public, right? Because no matter the situation, if there's progress, then it's well received. So I just wanted to highlight how that's a good point. That's really important.
And I add one more thing to this, because what I think could be a winning recipe, that's a winning recipe, a recipe that actually for me works quite well, is actually micro speed and macro patience. So let's say, that there is this term called green coffee buyer. I do a coffee buyer. In reality, where I come from, I live in Switzerland. I have a good overview on the market in Central Europe. I don't really think that I know more than 2 people that actually only do this as their job. Most of the green coffee buyers, they are maybe roasters or they're baristas too, and they even clean the bathroom, right? Because most of the roasteries here are really small companies, and they wear several different hats. And yes, sometimes they can take care and source coffee and get in touch with producers and then WhatsApp or chat. But that is actually a very little amount of time you can spend there. So if you get in touch with someone, if you get in touch with a producer, what I really appreciate is micro speed. So if there's a reaction, so I just find myself texting, and then we share a lot of information, and yes, suddenly there's a sample on my desk. I think this is using an opportunity. So taking advantage of this, if there's a direct connection, just use it. Because most of the green coffee buyers I know, they do many other things, and having a number and having them on the line and chatting is one of the best options I can imagine.
Mm-hmm. And we have 2 comments or questions that are actually similar. We actually kind of tackled this a little bit. Lucia Ortiz again from Las Mercedes, have you had the experience that the story doesn't match the reality of the farm? And then that was followed by what about from Mark Bollinger? What about the flip side of the focus on the story? What happens when the story is not true? Is enough being done by roasters, or are they happy to just pass the story along? So a little bit the same. Is the story the reality of the farm? Is the story? I think we've touched this. I don't know if we did today about the copy and paste issue that sometimes happens with roasters and farmer stories. I don't know who wants to tackle that.
Philipp.
Well, I can say maybe the same thing in different words again. So to me, it helps if I just double check with the producer or where I get the coffee from. So is it true? Or what do you want me to write? It's actually that simple. I mean, I can figure out something with the data I get from a producer. And it always depends on the data, right? So this is why I wanted to stress these points previously, that the data producers give to roasters, that is the thing roasters will work on and create the story. So the data can be quite raw, but still, if something's unclear, I think it's the task of a roaster to double check with the producer. Is it really right? Sometimes, well, there was a case when I posted something and the variety was wrong because I said it's a Caturra. And then, the producer just called me, no, it's not a Caturra, it's a Catuai. So, all right, thank you. So I could have asked you too, because I was unsure in that moment. It's a simple thing, but maybe it's simple for me. It's not that simple for someone else, because I don't know what happens with this information for the producer if I just state something that is incorrect. So maybe I ask again, and this, I see this as a big invitation for roasters to ask producers more about the truth or the facts they are going to portray.
So basic journalism practices, check your sources.
No, and if I can say something about that as well, I think when I was working as a journalist as well, it's like you will read a lot of the things, a lot of your base material. You do some research, you read most of the things that you can get, so you can get a context, and then you go to the source and you check it, and then you see what you want to write about it. So I think the best way, ideally, people would be writing all their content and not just copy and pasting their content. But I also understand that roasters are really busy, and I don't want to throw stones at anyone. But Diego, save me here because I'm getting myself in a bad place.
No. I mean, at the end of the day, of course, you have to measure how much spice you add to your story, right? In Spanish, we say it picantear una historia, ¿verdad? And it might be that I don't know, you had this coffee that was wonderful, and you make it more wonderful, right? But you have to be careful because at the end of the day, you're also creating an expectation on the minds of the clients and the consumer that you're gonna have to hold, right? You're gonna have to live with, and it's I think that in this business you're gonna want to be for a long time, and so protecting the integrity of that story and controlling that expectation so you can deliver on it year on year is also going to be a measure for success.
Well, I'm going to wrap up here because we're a bit past the time that we said we're going to go to. I don't know if anyone has anything else that they would like to add. And I'm aware as well that we have not answered all the questions. So we're going to go through them afterwards, and then we can send a follow-up email. We're going to send a recording to you all of this webinar, and then we can address some of the questions that were not addressed today. But so thank you very much, everyone. James, Philip, and Diego, if you guys have anything else that you want to add.
No, thank you for helping put this on. I don't know if you guys want to share any of your guys' social media in the chat. If your Instagram is in the chat, I would say type them now, so they can follow your story, Diego and Philip, and Cropsters as well. Cropster has 3 at Cropster Latino, at Cropster Brazil, and just at Cropster. But we're easy to find.
Right. One thing I would like to stress again is that well, I'm a roaster too, right? And yes, we buy based on quality, but we also buy, well, because we like people, and you know, we buy coffee for different reasons, and the story is important too, yes, but the story itself doesn't have to be an Indiana Jones story. So everything is a story, as we discussed in the beginning, and Diego showed pictures, and everything Diego showed could be a potential story. And sometimes we may tend to overrate what a story should be. So, but again, a story can be as simple as breaking a pencil and make a story out of it, but let people know what happened. So let people enter into your world and take them by the hand and just take them through one day, maybe. So this is a normal day on a coffee farm. Let me show you what I do. I cut the branches, etc. So simple things. But since many coffee roasters, again, cannot or will not visit a coffee farm in their life, they're dependent on the information they get. Yeah. So the more accurate the information is, the more true can a story be told by roasters about producers.
Yeah, I agree totally. Sometimes, for example, the some of the posts that we've done that have the more views, the more likes, that people react more to, are just like pointing a camera at something that's happening. We're loading a container, we're pruning coffee, and honestly, these things there's very little knowledge around the world of how these things happen, and how much logistics there is, how much coordination, how much teamwork So really, just showing it bare, and without filters, it's a way to create that that thing that you have that is really valuable that you don't know you have, and that will ultimately become a really strong weapon, I feel.
Well said, Diego. Well, and I'll wrap up with that. Thank you very much. And a big thank you to Thomas and Roxanne, our interpreters today as well. So, well, have a good rest of your day, guys.
Gracias. Ciao.
That's good.
Beijinhos.